Welcome to the story of the Swahili people, a community shaped by the waves of history, the rhythms of culture, and the resilience of tradition. Stretching along the East African coast, from Somalia in the north to Mozambique in the south, the Swahili people have been at the crossroads of civilizations for over 1,000 years. Their legacy, deeply intertwined with trade, language, religion, and architecture, continues to shape modern East Africa and beyond. Join us as we embark on a journey through time, exploring the history, language, religion, architecture, traditions, and the profound impact the Swahili people have had on the modern world. But we must also examine a darker chapter of Swahili history, the Indian Ocean slave trade, a system that saw millions of Africans forcibly taken from their homelands and sold into slavery across the Middle East, India, and beyond. The Swahili people emerged as a unique cultural and linguistic group through the centuries-long fusion of Bantu-speaking Africans with Arab traders, Persian merchants, and Indian settlers along the East African coast. This blending of diverse influences created a rich and vibrant Swahili culture reflected in their language, architecture, religion, and customs. The earliest Swahili settlements, such as Kilwa, Mombasa, Lamu, and Zanzibar, evolved into major commercial hubs that thrived on international trade. These coastal city-states served as vital points of exchange where goods such as gold, ivory, spices, and textiles flowed between the African interior, the Middle East, and the broader Indian Ocean world, linking East Africa to global trade networks. By the 12th century, the Swahili city-states had become some of the wealthiest and most influential regions in Africa. They were ruled by powerful local elites who gained their wealth and influence through trade, diplomacy, and increasingly through involvement in the slave trade. These leaders developed sophisticated urban centers with grand stone architecture, mosques, and bustling markets, showcasing the prosperity brought by maritime commerce. However, this golden age was interrupted in the late 15th century with the arrival of the Portuguese, led by the explorer Vasco da Gama. Driven by a desire to control the lucrative trade routes of the Indian Ocean, the Portuguese launched a campaign of conquest and domination. By the early 16th century, they had taken control of Mombasa, Zanzibar, and Kilwa, forcing Swahili merchants to trade under their rule. The Portuguese built forts, including Fort Jesus in Mombasa, to secure their grip over the region. They disrupted established trade systems, destroyed key cities, imposed heavy taxes, and weakened the authority of Swahili rulers. Portuguese control persisted until the late 17th century, when Omani Arabs successfully expelled them and reasserted Arab influence over the Swahili coast. One of the most controversial and tragic aspects of this era was the rise of the Indian Ocean slave trade. Enslaved Africans became a significant part of Swahili commerce, leaving a dark legacy that continues to shape the region's history and collective memory. The Indian Ocean slave trade stands as one of the most somber and troubling chapters in Swahili history. Unlike the transatlantic slave trade, which primarily transported Africans to the Americas, the Indian Ocean trade funneled enslaved people to destinations across Arabia, Persia, India, and parts of Southeast Asia. This trade spanned centuries and involved complex networks of merchants, sailors, and political figures who profited from human exploitation. Swahili city-states such as Zanzibar, Kilwa, and Mombasa became pivotal centers in this vast trade network, acting as key intermediaries between inland African communities and overseas buyers. Local African chiefs and rulers were often complicit in the system, capturing or trading prisoners of war and other individuals in exchange for imported goods such as cloth, beads, firearms, and other luxury commodities. Many enslaved individuals were forcibly taken from the interior regions of the continent, especially from areas that are now part of modern-day Tanzania, Mozambique, and the Congo Basin. Once transported to the coast, they were held in holding areas before being sold and shipped across the sea. Notable holding areas included Bagamoyo, Zanzibar's slave markets, and Kilwa Kisiwani. These locations had stone enclosures or open-air pens where enslaved people were confined under harsh, overcrowded, and unsanitary conditions, often awaiting transport for weeks or months. One striking difference between the Indian Ocean and Atlantic slave trades was that more women than men were enslaved in the Indian Ocean system. Women were highly sought after for their roles in household labor, concubinage, and domestic service, especially in Arab and Indian societies. Unlike the Atlantic trade, which emphasized male labor for plantation work, the Indian Ocean trade often prioritized women for their perceived value in domestic and intimate roles. Many enslaved women were taken to royal or wealthy households where they worked in kitchens, cared for children, or served in harems, particularly in the Middle East and South Asia. Most enslaved men in the Indian Ocean slave trade were subjected to grueling and often brutal labor conditions, particularly on plantations in places like Zanzibar, Oman, and parts of southern Arabia. These men toiled under the scorching sun, working in clove fields, date plantations, or other agricultural enterprises owned by wealthy elites. However, one of the most cruel and inhumane practices associated with this trade was the castration of many male slaves. This was done to prevent them from marrying Arab women or fathering children, as enslaved men were often viewed as threats to the social order. The survival rate for these men was tragically low, as the procedure was extremely risky and frequently resulted in severe infections, excessive bleeding, and death. Castrated men who did survive were often assigned specific roles as eunuchs, serving in royal courts, guarding harems, or performing specialized duties in elite households. This aspect of the Indian Ocean slave trade highlights the extreme physical and psychological suffering endured by enslaved individuals, and it underscores the broader systems of dehumanization that were deeply embedded in the trade. The legacy of these practices remains a painful chapter in the history of slavery in the region. Unlike the Atlantic slave trade, where the children of enslaved people automatically inherited their parents' enslaved status, the Swahili and Arab slave trade operated under a different social system. In many cases, children born to an enslaved woman and an Arab man were granted their father's status and were considered free. This practice created a more fluid social structure, where some individuals of enslaved descent could gradually integrate into Swahili and Arab societies. These children were sometimes recognized by their fathers, given education or property, and allowed to participate in the cultural and economic life of the community. As a result, over generations, some formerly enslaved families were able to rise in status, gain freedom, and even become respected members of local society. While this did not erase the brutality of slavery, it did create opportunities for social mobility that were largely absent in the transatlantic system. This distinction highlights the complex nature of slavery in the Indian Ocean world, where social boundaries were sometimes more flexible, and assimilation was possible under certain circumstances. Nonetheless, these opportunities were not available to all, and the broader institution of slavery remained deeply exploitative and dehumanizing throughout the region. One of the most infamous and influential figures in the Indian Ocean slave trade was Tipu Tip, a Swahili Zanzibari trader of mixed African and Arab descent. Active during the late 19th century, Tipu Tip built a vast commercial empire centered on the trade of enslaved people and ivory, two of the most valuable commodities of the time. His operations extended far beyond the Swahili coast, reaching deep into Central Africa, where he established a powerful network of slave routes and trading posts. He led numerous expeditions into the interior, capturing people and acquiring ivory, which were then transported to the coast for sale in markets like Zanzibar. Tipu Tip's wealth, military power, and strategic alliances made him a dominant figure in both local politics and commerce. His activities were supported by armed caravans and a large workforce, and he even held official titles under the Sultan of Zanzibar. Though admired by some for his organizational skill and political acumen, Tipu Tip remains a deeply controversial figure due to his significant role in the enslavement and suffering of countless people. His legacy is a stark reminder of the human cost of the Indian Ocean slave trade and its enduring impact on African history. By the mid-19th century, the Indian Ocean slave trade began to decline due to growing international pressure, particularly from British abolitionist movements and Christian missionary groups. These organizations actively campaigned against the inhumane practices of slavery and brought global attention to the suffering endured by enslaved people across the Swahili coast and beyond. The British, who had already outlawed the transatlantic slave trade, extended their efforts to the Indian Ocean region using both diplomacy and military power to curb the practice. British naval patrols in the Indian Ocean began intercepting slave ships and disrupting trade routes, exerting significant pressure on local rulers who still profited from slavery. In 1873, after years of increasing tension and diplomatic pressure, the Sultan of Zanzibar formally abolished the legal slave trade. This marked a major turning point, as Zanzibar had been one of the largest slave markets in the region. However, despite this official declaration, illegal slave trading continued in secret for several decades, driven by persistent demand and deeply rooted economic interests. It was not until the early 20th century that slavery was fully outlawed throughout the region, with more stringent enforcement and international cooperation finally bringing the trade to an end. Although the legal abolition of slavery marked an important milestone, the legacy of the Indian Ocean slave trade left deep and lasting impacts on Swahili society. Entire communities had been shaped by the institution of slavery, from social hierarchies to cultural practices, and the trauma of exploitation continued to influence generations. The abolition of slavery did not immediately erase the inequalities or social divisions created during the centuries of slave trading. Instead, it ushered in a slow and complex process of social change, as former slaves and their descendants sought to rebuild their lives within the evolving fabric of Swahili and coastal society. Swahili, also known as Kiswahili, is one of Africa's most widely spoken and influential languages, with over 200 million speakers across East and Central Africa. Today, it's widely spoken in countries like Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and parts of Somalia and Mozambique. Swahili belongs to the Bantu language family, but its vocabulary has been significantly enriched by centuries of contact with other cultures and civilizations. Due to historical trade and colonization, Swahili has absorbed numerous loanwords from Arabic, Persian, Portuguese, German, and English, reflecting the region's rich and diverse cultural heritage. For instance, many Swahili words reveal its rich history of cultural exchange. The word kitabu, meaning book, rafiki, meaning friend, and safari, meaning journey, all have roots in Arabic. Meanwhile, the word mesa, meaning table, comes from Portuguese. These borrowed words reflect the centuries of trade, migration, and interaction that have shaped the Swahili language into a unique blend of African and foreign linguistic influences. Historically, Swahili was written using the Arabic script, reflecting its early Islamic and Arab influences along the East African coast. However, with the arrival of European colonial powers, the language gradually adopted the Latin alphabet, which is still used today. Swahili has since grown into a major regional language and is now recognized as an official language of the African Union. Swahili is more than just a language. It is a symbol of unity and cultural pride, binding together diverse ethnic groups across East Africa. The Swahili people have a deep connection to Islam, introduced to the East African coast by Arab traders as early as the 8th century. Over time, Islam became a defining feature of Swahili identity, influencing their laws, customs, and daily life. Swahili city-states built magnificent mosques, such as the Great Mosque of Kilwa and the Friday Mosque of Lamu, showcasing stunning Islamic architecture. Swahili scholars contributed to Islamic literature, writing religious texts in a unique Swahili Arabic script. Even today, Islamic traditions continue to shape Swahili society, influencing everything from daily prayers, known as Salah, to major religious celebrations like Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. Islam has been a central part of Swahili identity for centuries, but it has always taken on a unique local flavor. Swahili Islam blends core Islamic principles with African customs, creating a rich cultural fusion that reflects both faith and indigenous heritage. Swahili culture is rich and diverse, woven with customs passed down through generations. One of the most iconic cultural symbols is the kanga, a colorful cloth worn by women, often featuring proverbs that convey wisdom or humor. Marriage and family life are deeply cherished in Swahili society, with weddings being grand affairs filled with music, dance, and feasts. The send-off ceremony, where the bride receives advice from elder women, is a significant tradition. The dhow, a traditional wooden sailing vessel, has been used for centuries for fishing and trade, connecting Swahili communities to the wider Indian Ocean world. Storytelling is also vital in Swahili culture, with hadithi meaning folk tales and ngano meaning proverbs used to teach life lessons. Music and dance are the heartbeat of Swahili culture. Swahili music is a blend of African drum rhythms, Arabic melodies, and Indian influences. One of the most famous and cherished Swahili musical genres is Taarab, which originated in Zanzibar. Taarab music is known for its rich blend of cultural influences, combining poetic Swahili lyrics with Arabic-style melodies and instrumentation. It features traditional instruments like the oud, a type of lute, the violin, and the kanun, a stringed instrument often used in Middle Eastern music. Taarab reflects the region's deep cultural ties with the Arab world and remains a beloved form of artistic expression. Other popular Swahili dances showcase the vibrant rhythm and cultural diversity of the region. Ngoma is a high-energy traditional dance that combines intense drumming, storytelling, and expressive movements, often performed during community celebrations and ceremonies. Beni, a unique dance style that emerged during the colonial era, was inspired by military bands and features choreographed marches, uniforms, and satirical performances. Kidumbak, a fast-paced and rhythmic dance popular in Zanzibar, incorporates quick footwork and lively beats, often accompanied by small percussion ensembles. Music and dance continue to play a central role in Swahili life, bringing people together at weddings, festivals, and everyday social gatherings. Swahili architecture is a breathtaking fusion of African, Arab, Persian, and Indian influences. Traditional Swahili houses were built using coral stone, lime mortar, and mangrove timber, creating cool and durable structures perfect for the coastal climate. One of the most famous Swahili architectural marvels is Stone Town in Zanzibar, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Its narrow alleys, grand mansions, and carved wooden doors reflect centuries of cultural exchange. Other impressive ruins such as Gedi in Kenya and Kilwa Kisiwani in Tanzania reveal the sophistication of Swahili city-states, with elaborate palaces, mosques, and even sewage systems. These structures stand as silent witnesses to the Swahili people's ingenuity and their role in global trade. The Swahili people have left an indelible mark on the modern world. Today, Swahili is one of the official languages of the African Union and is widely taught in schools across East Africa. The language has even influenced global culture, with words like safari and Hakuna Matata becoming internationally recognized. Swahili music continues to thrive, with modern genres like bongo flava fusing traditional Swahili sounds with hip-hop, reggae, and R&B. Artists like Diamond Platnumz and AllyKagawa have propelled Swahili music onto the global stage. Even in film and literature, Swahili storytelling remains strong, with movies and books capturing the essence of Swahili life, and the Swahili people are a testament to the power of cultural fusion, adaptation, and resilience. Their history, language, religion, architecture, and traditions continue to thrive, shaping the identity of East Africa and beyond. The Indian Ocean slave trade remains a painful but important chapter that must be acknowledged. Whether through their poetic language, enchanting music, or majestic coastal cities, the Swahili people remain an integral part of Africa's past, present, and future. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey through Swahili history and culture, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing content on African heritage and world history.